Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for tonight's talk, which is the Great Bustard. Your speaker this evening is Steve Colwell, and the talk has kindly been organised by the Oadby and Wigston Local Group. Your hosts for this evening are Frank and Stuart, and you can probably see them on your screens now. They'll be saying a few words momentarily. Again, I'd like to thank you for joining us on tonight's talk. As always, I would like to say, if you would like to support the Trust and you do enjoy these talks, please learn a little bit more about the Trust by visiting lrwt.org.uk. And if you have any questions about tonight or about the Trust, you can always email us at info@lrwt. At the end of the talk, we will have time for a short Q&A. So I am asking if you have any questions to pop them in the Q&A box and any comments in the comment box, and we'll get through as many as we can at the end. As always, I'd like to thank you, and I'll now hand you over to your hosts this evening, Frank and Stuart. Oh, Frank, you need to unmute. There we go. Oh, you've pressed it twice.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming along to this online talk, Avian Wigston Group. Sometime during the 19th century, the Great Bustards, these wonderful birds, were wiped out, became extinct in this country. But the great news is that they're back, thanks to the work of the Great Bustard Group. David Waters, who was going to speak to us tonight and who isn't, and of course Steve Colwell, who is our speaker. So he will tell us all about where these birds came from and how they were reintroduced. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. Yeah, hopefully you'll find the talk interesting. As Jordan said, we've got a short Q&A at the end. If you'd like to ask questions, I'm sure you'll do it in the usual way, type them in. And I'm going to give you a presentation tonight, various sort of historical facts, and as Frank said, why the birds became extinct in the UK, and all about the group and when it was formed and where we are now, and future goals for the group. So without any further ado, I think I'll start the presentation now. Can you see me?
Not just yet.
I can see you.
Share the screen. There we go. Modern technology. It's absolutely fantastic.
There we go. We're all on.
There we go. Okay, so let's say I've been with the Great Bustard Group now for just under a year. I was a work colleague of David Waters, who founded the group back in 1998. We were both serving police officers in Wiltshire, and David left the force to pursue his dream, if you like, of reintroducing Great Bustards to the plain. And I caught up with him after I'd retired, and being a keen naturalist and bird watcher, I bumped into him on Salisbury Plain and offered my services as a volunteer. And since that time, I've sort of become the visits manager of the group. As the title would suggest, I manage groups of visitors to see the birds, and also do online talks like this and talks in the general sense. So if we consider the Great Bustard, these are the words of a gentleman back in the 19th century. And if you can read those words, he says, it was a great British bird. He wrote these words, Reverend Alfred Smith, in 1887, by which time the Great Bustard had been totally extinct in the UK. I think the last one disappeared in the 1870s, but certainly in Wiltshire, the Great Bustard was shot to extinction in 1832. It was the last one which was recorded as being shot. And this was part of the reason why David Waters decided to try and reintroduce these magnificent birds to Salisbury Plain, as it is in his county, Wiltshire. And he was appalled really at a young age as to why the birds became extinct, and this has been his sort of lifetime goal since. The Great Bustard features on the county flag of Wiltshire. Here we can see this fairly modern flag, but you can definitely see that the Great Bustard is centre stage in our flag. And the green and white of the county flag of Wiltshire represents the chalk and the green grassland of Salisbury Plain. And this is, to a large extent, why they were so prolific in this particular area of the world, because of the habitat. They prefer large areas of open grassland and arable farmland for feeding, and they were also represented on our coat of arms from way back. You see it on the top of the coat of arms of Wiltshire there, again with the green and white of the Salisbury Plain. But they were also they also had a stronghold in the east of England, and possibly as sort of as near to you as Leicester and Rutland, because of the habitat and the areas for nesting which they preferred. And this is the coat of arms of Cambridgeshire, where you see the two bustards standing either side of the central crest. I can just give you some facts about Great Bustard that you might not be aware of. They are the world's heaviest flying bird, and average weight 13 kilograms, but can be up to 20 kilograms for the largest males. And the males are the largest. They have the greatest sexual dimorphism in the bird world. Great Bustard males are on average 2 to 2.5 times the size of females. And again, males stand up to about 1 meter tall when they're stood next to you. You don't want to get too close to them because they can give you a very nasty peck. But yeah, they are part of the Great Bustard, of the Bustard group, which comprises, I think it's 26 individual species, but in their class, they're the only, the Great Bustard Otis tarda. They are omnivorous. Most of their diet is green vegetable matter, so they feed on farmers' crops, grass, but they will feed on insects. They're opportunist feeders, really. They will eat anything that comes within reach, insects, seeds, invertebrates, even small mammals. They will take lizards and also field voles and mice. As already mentioned, they were hunted to extinction in the UK in 1832. And this engraving from the period gives us a flavour of what the average sort of ornithologist or hunter was up to in that sort of period. It was almost a race to the bottom, really, to see who could shoot the last one, if I can put it like that. And even ornithologists weren't innocent in this respect. I mean, it's easy to judge now in these enlightened times, where conservation is all about trying to conserve species. Back then, as I'm sure you all know, it was all about shooting them, stuffing them, and preserving them and showing them, basically. So they were hunted to extinction for partly that reason, partly for food, although they weren't really a good bird for eating. They were seen more as a sort of status symbol. King Henry VIII, I think, had at one point, it's recorded that he had 40 odd Great Bustards at one banquet. So it was certainly a status symbol to have the biggest bird on your table. we do have examples of stuffed great bustards from back in the day, and if there's one positive that comes out of this, is that nowadays, with the advances in science, we can take DNA from these stuffed examples, and this has indeed helped us to further the reintroduction of the UK, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. So here's our founder, David Waters, recently awarded the MBE for his services to conservation. And so he set up the group in 1998. It was after a period when there was a project to reintroduce great bustards to the UK. In the 70s and 80s, various attempts were made without success, using birds from various locations around the world. And in 1998, the previous Great Bustard project folded, and David, who was part of that group, immediately set up the Great Bustard group and aimed to carry on the work and take it in a new direction. Now, of course, all you have to do when you are introducing a species is get yourself a book. Unfortunately, this one doesn't exist. And all that we've done in the group since its first beginnings is learn from various projects around the world. There are projects in Russia, Iberia, where most of the European bustards are, great bustards. And it's certainly a steep learning curve in terms of how to bring these birds back from extinction, basically. So unfortunately, there's no easy reference book. And in fact, it's always said that here in the UK, we are sort of writing the book from page one, really. If we look at the map of Europe, great bustards are found across the central belt of Europe, really, and into Asia. You can see on this map the various colour codes relate to where birds are extant and resident, breeding, where they're passage birds, and where they're non-breeding. Now, great bustards aren't migratory as such, but they will shift location due to weather conditions. They don't migrate to breed like swallows or other birds. And you can see with the green shading on the maps there that there are, I think the main population of great bustards is in Spain on the huge sort of areas of grassland that they've got in that country. But by far the greatest expanse of where they are is in Middle Europe, in Russia, and that sort of area down to the Black Sea and beyond. And you'll see on there marked the town of, or the oblast of Saratov, which is where David Waters decided to look first for suitable birds to bring back to the UK. And the reason he did that was because by liaising with the group in Saratov, he found that a lot of the birds were being destroyed by farmers, largely unintentionally, but because great bustards nest on the ground, they are vulnerable to, and they're nesting in crops, they are vulnerable to being destroyed by farmers when they harvest their crop. So this is a typical field, for want of a better word. It's a vast grassland in Saratov, and the difficulties were that mother birds, adult females, would stay with their eggs and their chicks in a nest on the ground, which is basically just a scrape, and they would sit tight while the the tractors were advancing, and they would be destroyed because they wouldn't leave their eggs. So what David did was he went out and he arranged through the Russian authorities licenses, which you can imagine was not easy. And the idea was that they would save the eggs that were in the farmers' fields from destruction, get them incubated and brought back, bring the eggs back to get them incubated first in Russia, and then bring the small chicks back, which were, I think it was 2 months old, back to the UK. Now, here's a typical picture of Russian farmer out in the grasslands of Saratov, and you can see the danger that the machinery would present to the birds. If you look at the scrape on the left on the nest, it is literally that. It's just a scrape on the ground. There is no construction of a nest at all. And the eggs that you see there are usually within 3 to 4 inches in length. Mother bird will usually have a clutch of 1 or 2 eggs, occasionally 3, but on the plain and Salisbury Plain this last year, we did see a female with 4 chicks, which was absolutely unheard of, really. And we don't know whether they were all her chicks or she adopted one from another female, but it was certainly great to see that. To bring the chicks back from Russia, apart from all the paperwork and bureaucracy that was involved, they had to be brought back in specially created crates, which were manufactured on site. And the long journey began after the chicks were hatched. These suits that you see the project members in Russia wearing are very similar to the ones that we wear at the GBG on Salisbury Plain. We don't have a visor as such now, but we still have a suit that you see like here with a white front and a darker back, and we combine that with like a peaked sun hat, which gives the impression not that we are bustards, but that we're not human, and that the idea is that we raise chicks from newly hatched through to point of release, which is usually about 4 months, between 13 to 16 weeks really. We don't want them to be used to humans and to approach humans thinking they're going to be fed. So this is why we wear the suits. And we wear suits, as I say, like this, and they are fed with a glove puppet, for want of a better word, to imitate a mother feeding her chicks, because although the chicks, when they are hatched, they are precocial, they're able to get up straight away and walk, but they do rely on their mothers to feed them. And by the way, males play no part in the rearing of chicks. They are purely there for breeding, and they will mate with several females in a breeding season, but they play no part in raising chicks. And in fact, females will see off males if they approach the females when they've got chicks. Can everybody still hear me okay? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So this is these are chicks in Russia. They say they're about on the point when they are about to be flown back to the UK. And you can see the remarkable colouring of the birds. These ones that you can see here, mixture of male and female. And here they are being loaded onto a plane in Moscow. The paperwork that was involved, as I'm sure you'll probably gather, was horrendous. David tells me that there were 35 licenses that they had to have between Moscow and Saratov. All licenses for the chicks to be moved, and they varied from national down to almost parish level, had to have a license to make sure that we could actually move the birds. And to the extent that even if you know, one was not on the certificate, the whole lot couldn't travel at any one time. So it was a bit of a logistical nightmare, but we did manage to do it, and the first birds were released on Salisbury Plain in 2004. Now, it didn't start very well. The sort of survival rate was very, very low in the early years of the project. Partly it's thought now is because the young birds, the young chicks that are raised by humans, of course, reintroducing them to an area where they have no parental supervision means that they are likely to disperse, and that is in fact what happened to a large majority of the chicks. Russian birds do have a bit of a migratory sense, in that because of the harsh winters in the region of Russia where they came from, they will disperse to warmer climes and move south a bit. So maybe that's what happened to them in that respect. However, this, as you'll probably gather, is not Russia. This is the area of Castilla-La Mancha, which is made famous by the Don Quixote tales, and these are the typical windmills that are associated with that particular area. And it was back in 2012 that a study was done by Chester University, a gentleman who I can't remember the name of, to my my disgust, but he did we were looking at other areas of the world where the bustards would be more suitable to the UK. And it was found that by taking DNA from the stuffed birds that I mentioned earlier, they were most closely matched to the Iberian birds in Spain and Portugal. So that's why in 2012, the last birds were brought in from Russia. And in 2014, we started to bring back eggs from Castilla y León and Castilla-La Mancha in Spain. Very similar sort of landscapes. And we started to bring back eggs rather than chicks, which made it a whole lot easier, because of the fact that at the time, the UK was in the European Union. So there wasn't so many hoops to jump through, and you can get a darn sight more eggs into an incubator than you can chicks into crates. So we brought back, I think it was sort of 30 odd chicks per year, and started to raise them once we'd hatched them in the UK and released them onto Salisbury Plain. And from that point, the success of the project started to become alive, really, in that from those early sort of failures with trying to introduce the Russian birds, we still do have Russian birds on the plain. The population of these birds from the Spanish eggs has increased to the level that we now consider that the Great Bustard is almost self-sustaining on Salisbury Plain. We have around 100 birds with a broad mix of about 50% males and females, and so they will come back to breed on Salisbury Plain and become resident. This is David in Spain. He's never happier than up to his waist in mud. We had to drive down to Spain from the Channel, through France and into Castilla-León. And here is one of the incubators that we brought the chicks back with. plug them into the car and bring them back and eventually hatch them, as I said. Now, here's a shot of the typical sort of fields that great bustards will want to feed in and raise their chicks in. This is a crop called lucerne, which you may know as alfalfa. It's a forage crop, and along with oilseed rape, and bustards absolutely love it. We have a great relationship with the farmer whose land we rent, who loves having the birds on his land. But of course, he has a business to run, and he has to harvest the crops as he would in normal times. So you can see the danger again through, farm activity. So what we do now is we will go out into fields where we think nest would be when the harvest time is coming along, and we will do a line search of the field to flush out the adult birds and recover eggs or chicks from the nests, so that we can safely bring them back to the reserve. And also in that way we save the adult breeding females, which is the most important thing for the project to continue. So yeah, this is, as you say, you can see the typical sort of landscape behind: open fields. Bustards don't like to be too near woods or hedge lines because they will feel vulnerable. So you will tend to find them in the middle of fields, and as I say, they like mixed arable farmland in which to raise their chicks. And here are eggs that I actually found last year in the first line search that I did, which was very exciting. We, as you can see here, we put them straight into a suitable item of headgear and take them to an incubator in a waiting vehicle. We then take them to the Cotswold Wildlife Park in just outside Burford, and they do the incubation and hatching of the birds for us. Incubation period is about 26 days from laying. So when the birds are hatched, we get a call from Cotswold Wildlife Park, and we come and pick them up the next day and bring them back to Salisbury Plain, where we carry out the rest of the rearing of the chicks. And this is a typical, this is at our headquarters. You'll see me coming in a second if I just play this. And you'll see the suit that we wear and the size of the chicks when they're first hatched. And I'm feeding them with a very small dried cricket there, and a very small amount of the lucerne crop. But you can see this is typical behavior that the chicks would experience in the wild, that they learn to feed from their mother. And so this is what we're trying to recreate with the glove puppet. And we always wear the suits when we're working with the chicks. Now these chicks are about a couple of days old, and they won't eat for the first 24 hours. They will absorb the yolk sac from birth, from the egg. We will take DNA from the shells and send them off for DNA. So we do it in a scientific way, and after 24 hours or so, we then start to feed them, and we feed them with a mixed diet of mainly lucerne crop, but with supplements and other suitable dietary requirements. They're fed on site in the reserve, starting off at every hour, and then we increase that to 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And we don't feed them at night because in the wild they wouldn't be fed at night by their mothers. So, but they do put on a hell of a lot of weight during their first couple of months. And this is a male. It could well have been one of the ones that we've just seen. at almost point of release, and this one was standing, preventing me from getting out into the pen area that you see behind me. Very sort of dominating male there, and he was quite a character, stamping his feet, not letting me pass. And they do, as I say, they do have a hell of a peck on them. But you can see the birds in the background there. We keep them in rearing pens. Once they've been in the sheds for a couple of weeks, we put them out into an area such as this. We shut them up at night in a heated shed, but in the daytime we let them out into an area such as this, covered area, to protect them from predators. But they do get used to the natural grassland of Salisbury Plain within the area, within the reserve here. Prior to release, the birds are checked over by our local vets. This chap here is John Chitty on the right. He's our vet that's been with the group virtually since it started in 1998. He's an exotic bird species specialist from Andover, Anton Vets, and he does come out every year once we are ready to release the birds and give them a full veterinary check over, which includes taking blood samples and microchipping the birds so that if they are found, we know where they've come from. And we don't release any birds that aren't 100% fit because it would be unfair, they would be vulnerable. And part of the checks is obviously looking at the wing condition, making sure that they've got good development of wings and they're all in good order. And we will ring the chicks with leg rings unique to the Great Bustard group. And each year we have a different coloured ring. This last year was green, as you can see here. It's got our contact details on there and website, should anybody find one, so that we can identify where they've been. We even look into their eyes, and this one unfortunately had cataracts. We can probably pick up on in this picture. So this one was not released into the wild. It was taken to a wildlife park in Norfolk called Watatunga. Ed Cook, who does a marvellous job up there, they have captive breeding scheme in Norfolk. And so this bird, any birds that we don't release, if we can, we will give them to captive breeding schemes. Cotswold Wildlife Park also have captive birds, but them, Watatunga and ourselves are the only places where you will see great bustards in numbers. They have been seen flying over various parts of the country and indeed abroad. Here we see another picture of the female, this time in the pen. You can see in the background we've got cows in the fields and what have you. And this is at the point of release. It's literally a question of opening the end of the run and coaxing them out with some food, and they are then free to wander around the reserve or fly off. In fact, we did have one fly off immediately once we released it. One came back and the other one didn't, but that's wildlife, and that's the nature of the birds. But the actual reserve is 14 hectares in size, so it's quite a big reserve. It's protected by electric predator fencing, and the main predators of great bustards are, in their early years certainly, would be foxes. When they're chicks, birds are raising chicks in the wild naturally on Salisbury Plain now, and also the chicks do get taken by corvids and other raptors such as red kites and sparrowhawks, etc. So yes, they I think the rate of survival is not fantastic, but it's okay. And so we've managed to sustain a population of about 100 birds now on the plain, so which is fantastic. Here's one of the birds that David released back in 2004. Actually, is still with us. His name is Fergus, and you can see he's got an orange wing tag on his wing there, orange 21. And he was, unfortunately, just prior to release, he damaged his wing somehow, and so we couldn't release him. But he now lives with David and his wife Karen at their home. They have a large area at the back, protected with netting, etc. And he is quite a character, and he's 17 years old now, coming on 18. So he is one of the attractions. Here, seen with Ray Mears. This appeared on Facebook back in, I think it was last autumn. This was a chap that was out walking with his daughter in northern France, and he was just sat down with her in the field, and this bird came across and approached him. And if your French is up to scratch, you'll see that he was walking, a great bird came towards us to see us. We were sat down, and it stayed with us, which is remarkable. Less than a meter away. Now, by looking at this picture, we were able to determine that it was one of our birds that we released in the UK. So they are quite capable of flying across the channel, and in fact, some of our birds have been found in the Channel Islands. What they will do is they don't reach sexual maturity, the females, for 2 years. So they don't have a breeding instinct for the first 2 years, and they will disperse quite freely, but they will come back to the area that they were raised and hatched. So we have had birds come back from Channel Islands and from other parts of the country here, back to Salisbury Plain, which is their home. This bird, last year, we received a telephone call from a farmer in South Oxfordshire who thought he had a great bustard on his land. And he said it was funny because there's a scarecrow just in the edge of that maize field, which is dressed in a light sort of coat, a white coat. And the bustard would go up to it every day and expect to be fed, because he thought, or she thought, that it was one of us back at the reserve and was going to feed it. And then it would just sit down by the scarecrow. It's one of the birds that we released in 2019, a female, at our alternative site that we released them just off of Salisbury Plain. But the idea was that we would go up and collect her and bring her back to the reserve, but she was in perfect health, as you can see here. And even though we tried to approach her with the dehumanization suits on, she would fly off, and we thought it best to just leave her. We don't want to try and catch her and damage the wings or whatever. So she will find her way back to us, hopefully, and start breeding within the next year or so. And here's another picture I took of her on the day. You can see the ring clearly on the right leg there, red 75. Now, great bustards are quite feisty birds. They will stand their ground. This is remarkable pictures of a Corey bustard, very closely related to the great bustard, and almost equal in size, but not quite. And the story goes that this chap was out on a game reserve in South Africa, I think it was, and certainly in Africa. And a family of cheetahs, a female cheetah and her 2 cubs, came across this Great Bustard and obviously wanted to hunt it down and eat it. But the bustard was having none of it. And remarkably, this bird was able to see off the cheetahs who thought better of it. Absolutely remarkable. And here's another picture I took of a male last year. Did a lot of lapwings on Salisbury Plain, and this one in particular was protecting its nest from a great bustard who seems quite nonchalant about the whole affair. These birds are photographed. I took photographs of these from the photographic hide we have on the reserve, which people can hire out in the breeding season. And we call it photographing the lek if you look at the website. And you can get some remarkable pictures from quite close up from our hide there. And here's a male in full breeding plumage and doing his display, his breeding display. This is Pink 2. Again, one of the Russian birds. You can see by the wing tags. We no longer put wing tags on birds. We haven't been doing so since we started bringing eggs back from Spain. We use the leg rings now, but you can still see the birds with their wing tags on. They will live, well, Fergus is 18 years old now, and in the wild, they can easily live to 20 years or more. And here's a short video of breeding display by a male on the reserve. I think this was late in the breeding season, and the female wasn't very interested. But the birds will. The breeding season goes from late February, early March through to about May when the eggs are laid. But the males will continue to display on until sort of late summer, June, July at least. They will, as you see, they inflate their gular pouch on the front of their neck to a huge size and sort of waggle that about. They will then also raise their tails over their back to really reveal their white feathers underneath, and turn their wings almost inside out to display all their white plumage. And it's thought that females prefer the whitest, largest birds with whom to mate. So that's why you get them displaying like this. It's funny actually, because when the male birds come into sexual maturity at about 5 years, and so they start to display, the young birds, and they will be seen displaying throughout the day. But the older birds, the male birds, are wise to this, and they will only display early in the morning and later on in the evening. Reason being that we think that the ultraviolet in sunlight tends to fade their white colours, so make them less attractive to the females. So that's why the males do it at those times. But obviously the young birds will figure this out somehow and adapt their behaviour. Here's a bird which is quite commonly seen at Stonehenge. It's a female called Gertrude, who's quite now used to humans and will approach humans when they're going around the stones. And here we see David with Sir David Attenborough, and we have a lot of support from conservationists, celebrities, and what have you. And this is a photograph when David met Sir David at his home, I believe. So very, very good. And our patron is the Prince of Wales. Here we see Prince Charles at our main hide, which overlooks the reserve. I say he's our patron and very keen on the project, and hopefully in years to come, we'll have great bustards possibly on Sandringham Estate. The village where I live, Shrewton, is very closely associated with the Great Bustard. Until recently, we had a pub in the village, just outside the village, called the Bustard Inn. And the local running club, every year they have a Bustard run, which raises money for the group, which is fantastic. And the Lord Lieutenants of Wiltshire regularly have galas and evenings to support the Great Bustard group. Here we see a past and coming in, succeeding Lord Lieutenant of Wiltshire, Sir David Scott, and I can't remember the name of the lady, I'm sorry. Oh, Nicky Aubrey, yes. At an evening with David Waters in Marlborough. And anybody who remembers Phil Harding from Time Team, he's a good old Wiltshire man, and he was there at that evening to support the group as well. Some more photos now of some birds up on the plain. I say we get great opportunities to see the birds if you come along to visit us. All details are on the website. And this is a picture I took about a year or so ago of bustards over the plain. And this was taken on January the 1st last year. You can see the snowy landscape. They're magnificent birds to see them flying over the plain. Wingspan between 6 and 8 feet, so something to behold. And they will fly around usually outside the breeding season, male and female groups. So going forward, what are the plans for the Great Bustard group? Well, we want to get the Great Bustard recognised as a re-established native species. The problem at the moment is because of legislation, the Great Bustard is not seen as a native British bird, even though it was hunted to extinction in the 19th century. We will try all avenues to get that reversed, because that makes a big difference to how we can raise funds to take the group forward. So we are working on that quite heavily. We hope to do that very, very soon. At the moment, our site is old. We rely on public donations for most of our funding. We get very little, if nothing, from government funds, and we want to go forward and purchase land for a proper visitor centre, headquarters and reserve. As I say, we have a brilliant relationship with the farmers on whose land we have our reserve at the moment, but we want to move forward so that we've got a purpose-built headquarters rather than the ramshackle buildings that we have at the moment. Improve legal protection and land management funding. Again, moving on from getting the recognition that the bird deserves. We want to make sure that the bird is properly protected and moving forward, and to achieve a successful captive breeding program. We're looking at the possibility of releasing birds in other suitable areas of England, but again, that takes time. There's an awful lot of work that goes into assessing land and making sure that they are perfect for birds. And I'm sure you'll understand it's no good having open areas if they're not suitable for birds. It's like barn owls. You can put up as many boxes as you like, but if they haven't got the habitat, then they won't survive and they won't stay. So we're always looking at possibilities of expanding the areas, possibly into the east of England. Let's say we already have captive birds in Norfolk, but you know, other suitable areas will be assessed. And ultimately, we want to extend the international status of the Great Bustard. We do have links, close links with projects in Germany, Russia still, and even as far as the Far East and China. So we want to join them all up and make sure that the Bustard can go forward as a success. I'll just show another short video that I did of bustards flying over the plain. And then after that, I think we'll be ready for some questions and answers. Okay, Jordan, that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Steve. I speak.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. That was terrific. Yes, we've seen these birds at great distance in the Alentejo in Portugal.
Oh, right.
But, you know, just a smudge in the distance, really.
Yes.
And to see them like that and so many flying.
Yes, it was
amazing.
It was a tremendous sight, I must admit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, Stuart, do you want to look? I've got one or two questions here from Eleanor. But if you want to ask the rest of the audience first.
With the questions we've got already. So
Okay.
how
Yes.
far in we've got a little bit of feedback here, haven't we? Yeah, just try and. So the first question, Steve, is how far in the future could we see great bustards as being a norm in wildlife?
Well, hopefully the sooner as soon as possible. At the moment, when you can see great bustards on Salisbury Plain, if you know where to look. As I say, about 100 birds or so we have at the moment, but there's no sort of end sort of population. We'd like it to be as many as possible. And there's no reason why it couldn't be 200, 300 plus. And provided that we continue to get support through fundraising and donations and legacies, etc., and some corporate sponsorship that we rely on, then we will keep continuing to rescue birds from the fields. We no longer, by the way, I forgot to mention, we no longer bring birds back from Spain because of the fact that they are breeding naturally in the wild. We know that. The birds that we see who have obviously laid their own eggs and raised their own chicks, either in the reserve or in other fields, we monitor them, we count them, but we don't catch them in order to ring them or anything like that, because we don't want to risk injuring them at all before we release them again. So the birds that we see, they are naturally breeding. We know that. We see birds without rings mixing with the birds that have got rings, and we know that those are the ones we've raised ourselves. So they are coming together, and I think it's because they are now becoming an established population that the young chicks do now have that parental guidance, and that is very important that they have that. It's like having small children. If you don't control them, they go off and do what they want. But there is an element of a large element of that parental guidance, meaning that they will stay and disperse less than they have in the past.
Could I ask you to stop sharing your screen, Steve?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Then.
If I can. Let me just escape from that. How's that?
Right, that's great, thanks. Yeah, so the next question comes from Pam. Have you had any problems with avian flu outbreaks?
Touch wood, no. We haven't had any recording. We haven't had any birds found dead, or they tend to sort of keep to themselves. Obviously, avian flu is, as I understand it, is something that is more generally seen in poultry and birds that are, large concentrations of birds mixing with other birds. But great bustards, you'll find they tend to sort of keep themselves to themselves. They keep in their own droves, which is the collective noun for bustards. And because they tend to sort of be out in the wild, in the large open plains, let's say, touch wood, we haven't had any reported cases. The only thing that has affected us is obviously with avian flu, they did bring in restriction zones for the movement of birds, and that did restrict us in terms of being able to move birds to and from our partner groups such as the Watatungu Project and the Cotswold Wildlife. So we weren't able to do that recently, but they have been restricted, so it seems that we're okay.
Thanks. We've got a question from Annie Hall. What is their song like? Do they make a noise at all?
They do have a call. You'll find that they almost have I'm not going to imitate it. They have a sort of like a mewing call to each other when they're first released, because they've sort of grown up with each other, and then they're suddenly given a release into the open. That they tend to sort of talk to each other. It's very sort of funny here. They sort of have this sort of mewing. It's a very gentle call, but it does, you know, that they can be quite loud, and so that they will tend to sort of communicate to themselves like that. And certainly the male birds, when they are lecking, they will have a sort of almost like a guttural growl that they sort of express sort of to other males.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions from Sharon. In the wild, would the chicks normally get imprinted on the mother?
Yes, I mean they stay with their mothers up to a year from hatching. They only disperse, if you like, when the female again comes into breeding, into the breeding season, and then she will obviously sort of shoo them away, and they will go their own way. They stay. They're very social birds. They will stay in their same-sex groups, and the females will look after the chicks, even though they are, to all intents and purposes, fully grown. They will stay with them as a social group.
Okay, thanks. And the other question from Sharon is, what is the furthest distance a bird has been seen from the reserve?
Well, the ones that we've recorded, like the ones in northern France, I mean, they can easily fly sort of 100 kilometers in a straight line across to the Channel Islands. I think that was the same bird that went, you know, from northern France over to the Channel Islands, but they, you know, with a wingspan of up to, you know, 6 to 8 feet, they need that to carry their weight, obviously, you know, that, and you'll see from the video that they don't glide as such. They're not like a raptor, like a red kite. They can't glide on thermals. They rely on flapping their wings all the time to keep themselves aloft. They only glide when they come into land. But they are very good flyers. People make the mistake of thinking that because they're such birds, they look like sort of geese and what have you, or even turkeys. They tend to think of them as very short flyers, you know, that they'll only fly a short distance, but no, they will fly great distances.
Oh, thanks. A question from Valerie. At what population size will you be able to cease the captive breeding?
Well, we don't, it's not captive breeding as such, because these are birds that are laid naturally in the wild. We sort of, it's not, yes, it is captive breeding, I suppose. It's the birds breed naturally. They then lay their eggs. Our only input at the moment is we need to rescue those eggs when they are at risk of being destroyed, and the birds. So, but when we raise them, we try and make ourselves obviously less like humans as possible, which, as I've said. But we hope with funding that we can possibly compensate farmers not to harvest their crops. That's one thing that we are looking at. If we can raise enough money to say to the farmers, we'll buy your crop or a portion of your crop where we know that birds are nesting, then we would be quite happy to leave them in the fields, raise their chicks, and let them do everything naturally. I suppose there will be a point when, you know, sometime in the future, I mean, not certain, I would suspect in my lifetime, but birds will become as commonplace as they were back in the 18th, 19th century.
Okay, we've now got a question from Susan. Do you have any problems with predation?
Yes, certainly with the birds that we don't raise, that are raised naturally by their own mothers. The young chicks we've seen taken by ravens, some on the reserve. The reserve is actually open to the air. It's not covered over with netting. We only have fences around the outside, being 14 hectares. So the young birds that we're not raising ourselves, which are protected, the other ones are vulnerable to predation within the reserve, and through mainly by aerial means. We have, you know, obviously quite a large population of corvids on the plain, and red kites. So they will take small chicks.
All right, thanks, Steve. I think Ellie's got a couple of questions. So, and then I've got a couple of questions of my own. So over to Ellie.
Yes, well, one's been answered, thank you. And thanks for a great talk, by the way. I was just wondering, following your initial project in Russia, incubating the eggs and so on, were people over there inspired to try to help them flourish more there?
Well, that was, yeah, there was a group where, I mean, David went to an existing group in Russia. They'd already started this process of rescuing the eggs and rescuing the chicks out there. So they sort of had a head start on us, if you like. And it was by liaising with them and collaborating and being able to sort of bring their chicks back. I mean, we had a good head start in knowing what to do. The pictures that you saw in the presentation were of that group, and there's also the ones in Spain who do a very similar sort of job that we do here. There's a couple of brothers called the Alonso brothers who have published papers, as have obviously our colleagues in Germany and in Brandenburg and in Russia itself. So yes, I mean, it's by doing that, and also David's been out to China to liaise with a similar project out there. So yes, we like to think they were inspiration, but we have sort of taken on board a lot of the practices that we've learned from them as well. So that's good.
Okay, I've just got a couple of questions to finish off with, Steve. So have you identified any other locations where you would like to reintroduce these birds?
Well, I mean, since they became extinct in the early 19th century, of course, the world has moved on. And farming has become more intense, which has resulted in a lot of loss of suitable habitat, etc. Intensive farming, shall I say. But with the way that things are going now, with farmers becoming more, in fact, I think that with the new legislation now, farmers will get paid not just for growing crops, but for producing a product which can be wildlife. So obviously we will be looking at ways to encourage, and we are looking at ways of encouraging farmers to set aside part of their land if it's suitable for them, bearing in mind that Salisbury Plain is kind of unique because of its relationship with the army. They tend to restrict access, which is great for bustards because we don't get a lot of human activity on the plain. But yeah, I mean, in terms of where they were, we know from archaeological evidence that they were in various other parts of the country, like East Anglia, and I don't think they were in Scotland, but you know, it's really down to suitable habitat. It has to be 100% right, or it won't do for them.
So you've touched upon sort of funding, but am I right in thinking this is exclusively run by volunteers?
Very much so, yeah. I mean, I'm paid by the group for my job, but there's only, I think, 2 or 3 of us who are actually paid, but the vast majority of the workforce, if you like, are volunteers. I started off as a volunteer and sort of came into the management side of things. But yes, we've got a broad mix of retired scientists, virologists, police officers, conservationists, people who've done various sort of game conservancy work in Africa, etc., and just keen naturalists and bird lovers who come along and help us with keeping the project going. And it's, you know, without them, we wouldn't exist really.
Yeah. Well, Steve, as a way of thanks, well done, absolutely stunning project, wonderful talk. And it's just great to see the successes that you've had and your plans for the future. So, I mean, congratulations to you all. And what I really was not expecting to see was a video of a flock of, what, 15 to 20 birds flying over Salisbury Plain. So, yeah, well done to everyone. Many congratulations and thanks for a really, really fascinating talk. So,
well, thank you very much. And
Yes.
if anybody wants to come down and see the birds, obviously we do conducted tours with Land Rovers on the plain. Go to our website, greatbustard.org. Click on visits, and you'll see all the details of when and where when you can come. We do visits 6 days a week at the moment. We don't do them on Sundays, but we are looking, you know, obviously with recruiting more volunteers and such like, the best time to come really is from sort of now onwards through to sort of June, July, when the birds are doing their breeding displays, and we call it the lek, very much like the you know, the birds.
Okay, thanks ever so much once again, Steve, and I'm going to hand back to Jordan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. I'm sure I speak on behalf of the whole trust. Thank you. A lot about a bird that I didn't really know anything about, so thank you very much. And I'm sure the whole trust will definitely the conservation team, learn more about the project and maybe in ways that the conservation team can help. Thank you to the Oadby Wigston Group for organising the talk, and thank you for Frankie Stewart for being your host this evening. Just a little bit more about us and the trust. We are delighted to host these talks for free, but if you would like to donate, what is very much appreciated. Find more ways to support by lrwt.org.uk. That's pretty much all from me this evening. So it's been a very interesting talk. If you have any questions, please just put them over as well. If you want to get in touch with Steve, please give them the name of his website. So yeah, I'll then see you on Friday. So thank you again, and I'll speak. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.